Okay, folks, we're ready to go. We're ready to go. I have a resolution. Moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Be it resolved that the regular council meeting agenda dated Monday, November 25th, 2019, be adopted as printed and circulated with the following deletion. Closed session Municipal Act 2001 confidential report HR 2019-18 and business arising from closed session. All in favor? Carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It occurs to me that I might have something in 7.2. I looked at it this morning, sorry, and I wrote it down somewhere. Can I look at it and get it to you? Thanks. It's just a couple of the people in that, in those minutes, like usual, they're clients of mine. It has no bearing on.
Okay, we'll get the written documentation from you.
Yeah,
and
if
the
you can
clerk
shoot
will
me the
get
paper,
that.
I'll tell you who they are.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's been one of those days.
Just before we get into the official meeting, by the way, welcome everyone. And just before we start, I would like to introduce a visitor to Huntsville, Charles, if I say this wrong, I'm sorry, Galbert. And he's from France, and he's in the audience there, and he's a Rotary Exchange student. And Charles has been in Huntsville since August, and he's here until next July. And so welcome very much to Huntsville and to our council procedure. All right, deputations. Our first one is from Matt, and that's Terry Shields, the Chief Financial Officer, and Natalie Bubella, the CEO of Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare, for a general update. And you have a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to move this way.
It's on my screen here, but I don't know if it's being projected. We'll turn it on.
Yeah, it was not. Oh, yeah, I can find it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this deputation today. We've been visiting all the councils, and we will be doing that over the next couple of months. And it's an opportunity for us to give you an update on what's happening at MAC. In June, in June of last year, the board did approve MAC's latest strategic plan. You can see that here before you. This is our plan on the page, which is just really the highlights of the strategic plan. And this was a result of very extensive engagement with hundreds of people. And we believe that this plan does reflect the voices of our patients, our family members, and our community. And they've told us what is important to them and what matters most around health care. And as a result, this is what we established in terms of our strategic directions. And I really do want to take an opportunity to thank all our stakeholders, including our staff and the community, for their feedback and input on the development of this plan. As we adapt to a changing landscape of healthcare in Ontario, we are very proud of where we have come from, and we are very excited to be working very collaboratively with our partners to provide outstanding integrated healthcare to our communities, delivering best patient outcomes with exemplary standards and compassion. As you are aware, I hope, accreditation did receive exemplary accreditation. And we were surveyed last December by a team of 4 surveys that were independent from the hospital. And this was the highest level of performance excellence that one can achieve through this accreditation process. And you may see when you come to visit the hospital that we now have banners up at both of our sites depicting this exemplary standing that we have received. And we're very, very proud of that. And I think that's not just a reflection of our frontline or point of care staff and physicians and volunteers, but it's also a reflection of our community. If it wasn't for the donations and the support that we receive from our community, we would not have had the tools and the confidence to be able to provide the kind of care that our surveyors saw when they were on site to do their evaluation. We're also involved in creating a quality improvement plan, and that, again, is a collaborative process that's involving many other community partners in the region around providing exemplary level of care to our patients. There are a number of areas that we're focusing on in our quality improvement plan. And one of the areas is around congestive heart failure and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease in terms of trying to provide the care that these patients may require and try to prevent them from coming into our emergency department. That's an example. As well, we recently did complete very significant renovations to our emergency departments for a total of $1.2 million to create purpose-built, secure rooms for spaces that protect and enhance the safety of our most vulnerable patients while maintaining their dignity and their privacy, and also ensuring a safe work environment for our patients. As well, MAC right now is ramping up for influenza season. Last year, about 76% of our staff and physicians were immunized, and we were actually the top hospital, acute care hospital in this LHIN in terms of the number of staff that were immunized, and we're hoping to surpass that target this year and once again be a top performer in this area. But I would highly encourage all of you and people that are watching, as well as other members of the audience here, to really take this seriously and get immunized. It's really important to ensure that we have that herd immunity out there, and that helps protect everyone and keeps people out of our emergency department. There are significant, so what do we do here?
Hit next.
Go to slide.
Let's go next all the way up top. See next all the way up top.
Great, thank you. Significant changes are coming to the LHINs and the broader healthcare system through the Ford government. You may have heard last week that there's been a reorganization of the 14 LHINs in Ontario, and now there are 5 administrative geographic areas. So the CEO that was part of the North Simcoe Muskoka LHIN, Jill Tetman, who I hold in high regard, is no longer with the LHIN, and there are administrative leads right now until some decisions are made around Ontario Health. We are currently now allocated or part of the geography of the central region. As well, the Ford government has created One Ontario Health, which is a super agency that is anticipated to replace the LHINs in the future. There have been some changes there as well, and as of December 2nd or 3rd, a number of agencies will come under Ontario Health, such as Cancer Care Ontario and Health Quality Ontario. And it is all around about delivering integrated care to Ontarians as we move forward into the future. In addition, the Ontario Health Teams that I'm sure you've heard a lot about is an area that we've taken very seriously here in Muskoka area, and we're working as one of the signatory partners for developing a Muskoka area Ontario Health Team here. And we hope to hear very soon about being successful in moving down this road to develop integrated care, which I think will be a huge improvement from as we roll this out over the years for all people requiring health care, and as well focusing on social determinants of health. So we're very, very excited about this. And are, of course, looking forward to hearing the ministry has announced some of the Ontario Health Teams today, and we're hoping that we're going to be on that list. The other area of focus for our strategic plan is around education and innovation, and you can see here that close to 17,000 hours were spent or required around staff education hours last year. As well, we had 32,000 medical education hours that occurred in our facility last year, and that's made up of residents, postgraduates, students, physician assistants, and undergraduate students. As well, we also brought in a voice dictation transcription system called Nuance. And in that, this is a smart phone app that our physicians can now use. Every dictation is voice recognized. It's far more efficient for our physicians and for others. It reduces transcription times and errors for our staff, and does ensure timelier access to chart completion, consult notes, discharge summaries, etc., which of course then benefits the patient. As well, we're very active telemedicine users. You can see here on the slide that over 2,000 hours of care has been facilitated by our Ontario Telenet Network nurses in the facility at both of our sites, and we're looking to expand that. And the government has made some recent announcements around telemedicine, including OHIP coverage for physicians that engage in consults through telemedicine. And we're looking to see that patients could potentially be able to have these telemedicine consults occur actually in the comfort of their own homes. And that's the kind of investments that the government is doing and has just recently announced as of last week. And as well, we're involved in the use of iPads to understand what family satisfaction is like for those patients that they may be seeing in the emergency department or in our ICU. As well, we've hired 91 new staff this year. We bargained 3 collective agreements, and that does take some time, and our HR department has been exceptionally busy as a result of these new hires and the bargaining of these collective agreements. And we also launched an employee engagement survey in 2019, and this will help inform the development of employee programs to enhance the employee experience for our staff. And you can see here, we did recruit 5 new frontline physicians as well as a new chief of staff, and we're very, very grateful that they chose to come to Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare to provide their care.
Okay, as we look forward, we will be focusing on our strategic plan that Natalie laid out in front of you just a moment ago. With regards to our budget, we finished 2018-19 in a surplus position, a small surplus position, and we thank all the local mayors for your continued support. For this fiscal year ending March 31st, 2020, we started the year with a $4.5 million deficit. On October 22nd, we received $3.2 million of funding, and as a result, we have $1.3 million gap to close. We continue to work with the LIN in the ministry, and we continue to look at internal operations, how we can balance operations. For our capital needs, we have $9 million need in equipment and technology, and another $40 million in infrastructure needs to keep our buildings operating safely and efficiently. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Moose FM radiothons that were conducted just before Thanksgiving. Between the two sites, between the two events, nearly $130,000 was raised, and we appreciate that very much. Thank you. And finally, with respect to our capital development program, we've been working through the Stage 1 submission since August 2017, led by the Capital Plan Development Task Force. This involved local mayors, doctors, administrators, our foundations, our auxiliaries, and community members. In October, the MAC Board approved a future plan of 2 new hospitals, a new build on existing Huntsville land, and a new build on new land in Bracebridge. The cost here, the total investment into Huntsville and Bracebridge totals $560 million. The Ministry of Health pays for approximately 90% of construction costs, while the local community is expected to contribute 10%, plus fund any furniture, fixtures, equipment, and information technology needs. As a result, the local share is $129 million. This is reduced by the projected equipment that would be transferable at the time of opening the new facilities, and that equates to approximately $35 million. This is based upon asset utilization of MAC over the last 10 years, when those assets would have to, and then looking forward when those assets would have to be replaced over the next 15 years. The foundations have committed to raise $10 million each for a total of $20 million. This is above the normal contribution that they make to the hospital every year. Therefore, as we look forward over the next 15 years, we are asking the foundations to raise $80 million. This leaves a balance of $74 million that will need to be raised. We appreciate that we have motions from all the local community, including the Huntsville. Thank you very much. We look forward to continued discussions with you in the district about how we can raise the funds needed to make this realistic and to make this come to fruition. This is a 5-stage process, and we are only at stage 1. These cost estimates will be evaluated as we move forward. So we'd like to take the opportunity and thank you for allowing us to come and see you today. We are always trying to reach out to our community. Our website actually gets 200 visits today, and you can visit us on Facebook and Twitter. So we wish you all happy holidays, and if you're in that giving mood, please do not forget about your local foundations.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and if you're willing to take a few questions, we'll see if we have some around the table. Questions from council? Councilor Withy.
You didn't look surprised when my hand up there. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. Thank you, Madam Chair. In your subsequent notes that in our agenda that weren't on the screen, these ones, I have a question. Under the activity for the fiscal year 18-19, you have a number of 4,919 admitted patients. I was wondering how many of those are ALC patients?
So we, on average, would, over the year, be about 27%, 26-27% of the patients would be ALC, and it varies depending on time of year. Today, when I look through our bed map, it was 30 patients in the building were designated ALC today,
On both sites?
across both sites. That was total.
And is that a static number, or is that,
No, it varies throughout the year, but on average, it would be anywhere around 26, 27.
In that area, we probably finished maybe a little bit lower than that at the end of the fiscal year, and we're trending this year versus last year slightly down.
thank you. May I continue?
Sure.
In your slide deck, I was just wondering, on slide number 6, you have the new physicians.
Yes.
Can you tell, I was just interested as to where they were located.
So the chief of staff is across both sites. Dr. Derek Smith, anesthesiology, is at the Huntsville site. Khaled Salem, the internal medicine, is at Bracebridge, and the other 3 are, I believe, in Huntsville.
Thank you. On the next slide, under capital needs, there's a figure there, $9 million in equipment and technology needs. Now, this is the deficit of $9 million that is on the list of equipment that it's on the wish list.
Yes,
That they
over a 3-year horizon.
3 horizon,
Across
and that's
both sites.
Both sites. Is it
Yep.
pretty much equal with each site?
Pretty well,
We will,
yeah.
we will.
So when we go forward to the projection of the local share of the foundation's commitment, I understand that each foundation puts $2 million Bracebridge annually, 1.6 Huntsville annually approximately, and then their commitment of another 20 million, 10 each site. Would that not be affected by that deficit right out of the gate as well? Because you're not starting at 0.
Correct.
So that number would be decreased by whatever the deficit of the day is.
So when we work with the foundations in nearly every single year, the ask over the last 2 years has been 1.6 million. And that is before any type of special projects come forward, like a stroke rehab unit or EMR system. So when you factor in all of those special projects on top of their annual commitment of about 1.6 million, it'll be about in a $2 million average area.
So the 9 turns to 2?
No, the nine is what is repetitive every single year based off the equipment needs that have been identified and mapped out over the next 3-year period. Okay, that's part of it. It's part of it.
Okay. One more?
One more?
Based on these projections for the local share, and we could debate the finer points of that, and I'm not about to do that here. But October 21st, we had meetings at district, and subsequent conservations. What's the plan if neither level of municipal government is amenable to levying for this amount of money? If you don't get any money out of each level of municipal government, where are you going to get your local share?
So right now today, stage 1 will be submitted in the next couple of days, actually, and we are very fortunate to have motion from council such as yours in concept supporting the way forward with regards to this. That is enough to move forward in stage 1. We will have to continue to work with council such as yourself and the district to see if this can actually be funded If not, then we will have to evaluate our alternatives at that time.
Okay, because we've got other issues that are coming towards us, as we'll hear later in this meeting, but thank you for your time.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. With regards to that last question by Councillor Withy, when you presented this to the other municipalities around, did you go to, I'm sure you did Bracebridge, did you do Muskoka Lakes and so on and so forth? So when as we heard before from Phil Matthews, that we're looking at an $8 a month cost over 50,000, from 50,000 different households in Muskoka over a 10 or 15-year period. How was that received in other municipalities? Were they shocked into submission at the $8 a month?
No, actually, when you take a look at it, it's a very large number. There's no other way of saying it. $560 million investment into these communities is quite large. The $74 million represents 13%, or 13 cents on every dollar that was spent. So we try to get it down to a portion or an understanding for everyone what that would look like on a monthly basis. So $8 equates to $8 a month equates to $2 a week. And this is also before the power and the benefit of compounding interest. So when you put it in terms like this, people can see it over a longer time period.
So I would expect,
versus saying, hey, we want to take or ask you for $5 million.
I would expect that there was not a lot of pushback on the $8 a month when they're talking about the possibility of 2 new hospitals.
No, there was not.
No. Okay, I just wanted to make clarification on that. Thanks.
Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Truziano, and thank you for your presentation. My question is very simple, I think. I know we've just completed the first phase and made our submission, so we're starting the second phase, and this is probably like throwing jelly to the wall, but what sort of timeline would that normally be as far as phase 2?
So we're just about to submit the stage 1, and there is no understanding necessarily of how long that would take. We could be going back and forth with the ministry over a 12-month period. It could be a 6-month period. It could be 18 months. And that was approximately our experience when we had the pre-capital submission that we put in. It was about an 18-month window of time where we were going back and forth between the ministry to answer questions that they might have. And there is no guarantee that the plan as submitted for 2 hospitals will be what the ministry may support down the road. So it's what the board has supported, what we believe our community wants that we've submitted. Once they do come back to us and give us the green light to move on to the next stage, there are still 3 or 4 other stages after that. So it could take up to 10 years or more.
Very quick follow-up, and thank you for that. So in essence, we're looking at 18 months probably in reality before we get to that next, whatever the next is.
I would hope it would be sooner than that.
But possibly, given our...
It's unknown, but it's a possibility, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Natalie.
Yeah.
Councillor Harmer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. My question has to do with the future redevelopment and financing, where Huntsville Hospital is quite a bit more than the Bracebridge Greenfield. Could you explain why the difference in cost for the 2 hospitals?
Sure. With regards to the Huntsville Hospital, what we're going to have is the stroke unit is envisioned to be in Huntsville. That equates to approximately 10,000 square feet additional space. There's also some cost, a higher cost here in Huntsville for the demolition of the current hospital site to turn that into parking. So those elements there, the true cost, and then what happens is the way the formula works here is just a higher number gets a higher percentage, like 25% for furniture and fixture. That gets applied to a higher numbers, and this builds from there. So really, it's the 10,000 square feet additional space compared to South Muskoka that is driving the majority of the cost.
Other questions? Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Truziano. In regards to the last point about the demolition of the hospital, I know many in our community are maybe a bit confused about that as to why we would take a seemingly asset that's in reasonably good shape that could be repurposed, and why we would elect to demolish it rather than transform it as part of the new hospital. Can you take us through why that was reached, that decision was reached?
So right now, based off topography of the land, the best way to build a new hospital is actually going sideways versus going down or up the hill. And as so forth, the hospital will be moving east or west, I'm not really sure. Hospital will be moving east, and as such, to bring the parking closer to the hospital for the patients. Today, there's a tiered approach. It's very, it's not the best solution for patients going up and down that hill. So we have the opportunity to put the parking on a level area next to the hospital. That's much better for patient care and also for the staff or physicians or anybody else.
And I would say that both hospitals look good cosmetically, but we actually have a lot of issues. Our facilities, based on independent reviews, have been rated as in poor to fair condition. A lot of things need to be replaced over time, and we have those timelines projected out by the assessments that have been done. As well, at the Huntsville site, most of the building is not sprinkled. We do not have a sprinkle system. We do not have a redundant water line there. There's a number of issues that luckily are not apparent to the public when they come in, so they feel safe and supported when they're in the organization, but we do have some challenges.
Okay. Just one thing I wanted to mention too, and I don't know if I just missed it or if you didn't mention it, that we are still lobbying the province to reduce the local share here based on our ability to pay. And that's something we will continue with, correct?
Yes, through the local share working group, Mayor Smith has actually taken the lead on that. I believe he is actually working to see if that can be achieved.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, we have a second delegation, Judy Brous from Muskoka Earth Festival. Welcome, Judy. Do you have a presentation or just going to talk to us?
I don't, I'm just going to talk.
Okay.
So, thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. Just a brief verbal presentation, actually. There is a group of people in Bracebridge, Huntsville, and Gravenhurst that have been getting together to put on first Muskoka Earth Festival next May 30th at the Bracebridge Fairgrounds. And in Bracebridge, because it's easy on and off the highway and it's visible and accessible. But we want it to be all of Muskoka. And we have two, the purpose of the Earth Festival is to move people from talking about climate change to doing something about climate change. And so I have been out talking to people at Greenside. Hopefully they will be there. I've been out talking to people at Sustain, and hopefully they'll be there as supporters, along with Ontario Hydro will be there with electric cars. So we're looking at how we move people along the path. And what we're asking for the town of Huntsville is that we know that all our municipalities, and Huntsville in particular, has done a lot of work on reducing your carbon footprint, improving your sustainability within the building and within your programs. And we'd like all our municipalities there to demonstrate to the public the work that we all have been doing and the advances that we've made. The other request that we're asking is that the township or the town work with us and promote our event through your website, and also allow us to promote your activities through our website. So again, we can reach out. We're trying to reach a broader cross-section than just Muskoka, and hopefully a broader cross-section than those that are already in the choir, and really celebrate all the work that we're doing in Muskoka. So those are the two asks. One, that you're there with the display, and that two, you can help promote it.
Okay, thank you for that. And questions? Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano, and not really a question, just a comment. Thank you very much, Judy, for that. I absolutely support this. I think it's a great idea, and I do agree. I think Huntsville has been leading the way on some things, certainly on energy conservation. So I would support something here that we could put together to participate in that. I do have a quick question. I'm assuming, given your relationship with the Watershed Council, that they might play a role in this in some way, or I'm throwing that out to you.
I've certainly been talking to the Watershed Council. I've made a presentation to them. I've talked to Christy. Obviously, the district are key partners that we'd like to see there. So yes, we're talking to everybody and anybody. The broader, the better, because we're all doing lots of good stuff.
Councillor Thompson.
Madam Deputy Mayor. Do we call you Deputy Mayor at the moment, or
That's fine.
Acting Mayor? Okay. I'm a little confused about that at the moment, but thank you. Judy, first of all, thank you for all your involvement over the years on different environmental issues, because you've been a real stalwart on many different fronts in that area type of thing. So thank you for all your involvement. Muskoka Watershed Council, as mentioned. I noticed you have a meeting at the Bracebridge Fairgrounds. Do you have anything planned for Huntsville? I know we have a pretty full, agenda here usually in the summertime, but we probably could find room for something like this in Huntsville if you so chose to bring something up here.
I think that the excitement is growing among the people that have volunteered to come out and help. There's nothing planned because we're still a small group. It's our first year. We would like to grow it, and as I said, this hopefully will be the first annual, and we'd like it bigger and better and more inclusive and more dispersed across the district. Again, anything that can help people move from that talking to the doing, we would like to encourage that. So where there's an opportunity, I think you'll find that we have people who would like to be there.
Well, okay, Judy, thank you very much. I think we have some stringent rules around website linking and stuff like that, but we have your contact information, so we're going to get staff to reach out to you and see if we can't put together some community partners and definitely do something for the May 30th event.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving into development charges. We don't have a spiel. Is that now?
Yes, that's now.
Like this is now? Okay, so this is going to be a public part of the meeting, so I'm going to read a rather lengthy welcome. Welcome to this evening's meeting about the Town of Huntsville's Development Charges Study. Prior to tonight's meeting, a report entitled Development Charges Background Study dated October 11th, 2019, prepared by Hemson Consulting pursuant to Section 10 of the Development Charges Act was made available to the public. The town, in accordance with Section 12 of the Development Charges Act, has also provided notice of its intention to pass a bylaw under Section 2 in December of 2019. This meeting is being held to fulfill the requirements of Section 12 of the Development Charges Act and provide a further opportunity for input into the matter. This public meeting will proceed as follows. Hemson Consulting will provide a presentation outlining the Town of Huntsville's Development Charges Study. After the presentations, members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak, whether in objection or in support of the proposed development charges, and council may then request clarification, ask any questions, or provide comment. It is important to remember that at all times anyone wishing to make representation do so through the chair of the meeting. Also, if you intend on speaking, you must first state your name and then provide your comments for the record. Please note that any presentations are limited to 10 minutes each. I now declare this to be a meeting pursuant to Section 12 of the Development Charges Act. Okay, so, Stefan, you're going to come up and use the PowerPoint, I take it?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. So as you mentioned, this is a public meeting held under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act, a meeting that's required prior to Council considering and passing a new development charges bylaw. My name is Stefan Cetrinovic. I'm an associate partner at Hemson Consulting, and we assisted the town in preparing the background study that you just referred to. A lot of what you see on the screen, members of council and Madam Chair, this evening will be a repeat of what I presented to council on September the 23rd. But for those members of the public for whom this may be their first participation in this process, what we're talking about when we talk about development charges are fees that are imposed on development to pay for growth-related capital costs. So it's capital costs of the town only, not operating costs, and capital costs only to the extent that they are related to expanding or extending or increasing the capacity of the town's existing infrastructure and facilities to accommodate the needs of new development in the town. And the principle behind them is that growth should pay for itself, so that the financial burden of expanding that infrastructure is not borne by the existing residents of the town. It's funded through these fees. Development charges are imposed by bylaw, and the maximum life of a DC bylaw is 5 years after the day it comes into force. The town's bylaw the current bylaw expires on March the 23rd, 2021. So this process is being done a little bit early this time, partly to align with some of the other bylaw processes that are going on in the district, including the district's process itself. And those of you who sit on district council will know that the topic of development charges came up last week, and I think there was quite a vigorous debate about it. The other reason for doing it early, I'll get into, is that this is kind of an unusual time to be doing development charges given some of the legislative changes that are occurring, but I'll get into that in a minute. Suffice to say that prior to passing a new bylaw, the town must undertake a background study. That's what we've been retained to help you with, and hold at least one public meeting, and that's today's purpose. And after the bylaw is passed, there's a 40-day period where anyone can appeal the rates and the provisions of the bylaw, and those appeals are adjudicated at LPAT. Worth also perhaps mentioning that the current bylaw imposes charges that are less than the charges the town could have imposed 5 years ago when it passed the bylaw. And we'll come back to that issue, I'm sure, as we proceed. I mentioned that the legislative framework under which we're doing this study is shifting right now. The Development Charges Act of 1997 still governs how we calculate the charges and the process we follow. But back earlier in the summer, the government passed Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act, that, among a number of changes, makes substantial changes to the DC Act and, more broadly, the way municipalities are going to be funding infrastructure in the future. The important thing about this legislation is that although it's received royal assent, many of the key provisions haven't come into force yet. And won't come into force until a date to be named by proclamation. And we don't know what that date is. Right now we've been told the province is aiming for the 1st of January 2020, but that date is fast approaching. And there are not yet regulations to that legislation. And many of the key changes that are going to be taking place will be put into place through regulations. We have draft versions of these, but they've not been finalized yet. Development charges are levied on a service basis. So when you look at development charge bylaw, you'll see a schedule of the rates, and you'll see a different rate for each of the services for which the charge applies. And under the current legislative framework, there are two types of service that are distinguished. There are services for which you can impose a charge to pay for 100% of growth-related capital costs. And then there's a group of services, the so-called soft services, for which you can impose a charge only to recover 90% of growth-related capital. And under the new framework, the list of services that are going to be eligible for funding is reduced to the list you see on the screen here. So it's just the engineering services of water, wastewater, roads, stormwater, and electrical power, the emergency services of fire, police, and paramedics, and then transit and waste diversion. So you'll note straight off the bat that a lot of these are provided at the district level. And moreover, under the new legislation, these will all be 100% services, or hard services. There will be no longer be any soft services in the development charge authority. What will happen to the soft services is that they're going to be removed from the Development Charge Act and replaced with a community benefits charge under the Planning Act. And this community benefits charge, as well as replacing the soft services, will also replace the town's current authority to secure parkland, either as land itself or as cash in lieu of parkland, as well as any contributions that the town receives from developers for additional building height and density, which I'm not sure occurs very often, if at all, in Huntsville. So there will be this new authority to impose community benefits charges that will replace the soft service DCs. Now, in Huntsville, those soft services include the library, the indoor recreation, parking, outdoor recreation, and development-related studies. So in fact, most of the services will fall away from the DC framework here in Huntsville. Right now, the legislation has a transition window for municipalities to make the switch from into the CBC regime. So right now, again, we are planning for the CBC authority to come into force on the 1st of January 2020. There will be a one-year period where municipalities can continue to impose development charges for soft services. And then as of the 1st of January 2021, the CBC framework will take over. In the meantime, between now until the end of this year, municipalities can pass bylaws for both hard and soft services. And that's what's being proposed through this process. So we're hoping to bring a bylaw to you for your consideration on December the 17th. And there will be two schedules in that bylaw, one for the hard services and one for the softs. And then the schedule related to the softs will just fall away once the new regime takes over. The background study was released on October the 11th, as Madam Chairman indicated. And the background study provides the town with the maximum permissible development charges it could impose, and it does it on a town-wide basis. So development, regardless of where it occurs, would pay the same charge. Since the background study was released, the maximum rates that were calculated have been reduced somewhat, and I'll get into the reasons why that's occurred in a couple of slides. These are the services for which the charge has been calculated on the left here, and you can see which ones are the 90% and the 100% services. So everything other than fire and roads will be removed from the development charge framework after the transition period. These are the changes that have been made. Most of them arise, I believe, in order to align the rates with the capital budget process that is currently underway. So we've included in the charge that was not in the study a road study which is analyzing the feasibility of a one-way road system. And we've also made adjustments to some of the costs of this proposed sand dome and snow blower, and those resulted in reduced costs for those projects. And the bottom line is that the rate impact is fairly minimal, but it represents a $39 decrease on the maximum residential development charge, and a similar, very minor decrease on the non-residential charge. The legislation is quite prescriptive about the steps to calculating DCs, so I won't get into this too much detail, but suffice to say, step one is to do a forecast of future development. Step two is to analyze the level of service that's been provided in the town over the last 10 years. That sets a limit on how much can be funded moving forward. The third step is to identify the infrastructure needs of new development. And then we have to identify the costs associated with those needs and where the funding sources might come from for those costs. So we have to account for any grants or subsidies the town might receive. We have to take 10% off those soft services. We have to account for any portion of the cost that is deemed to benefit existing residents. That is ineligible for DC funding. We have to account for any development charge reserve funds that the town has on hand to fund these costs. And then to the extent that some pieces of infrastructure provide a very long-term benefit that would extend beyond our planning horizon, we also have to remove those so-called post-period benefits as well. And what we're left then is the costs that are eligible for DC funding, and they are collected as a charge per unit on residential development and as a charge per square meter of gross floor area on non-residential development. This chart summarizes the development forecast. So it is the same chart that I showed Council on September the 23rd. You can see for the general services, we've calculated the charge over a 10-year period extending to 2028. And for the roads, we've gone a little bit further to 2031. And the residential forecast is planning for fairly strong and sustained growth. It's about 150 dwelling units a year, so 1,500 units over the next 10 years, and about 2,000 units between now and 2031. Most of those will be seasonally occupied dwellings. And on the employment side, again, it's fairly steady employment growth, mainly in the commercial, retail, and institutional sectors. Healthcare, for example. It's somewhat less employment growth than was forecast 5 years ago, and that has implications for the rates that have been calculated on the non-residential side. In terms of the growth-related capital needs, we have worked very closely with town staff and with reference to capital budget and forecast documents. The Act requires that any costs that are brought forward must be an expression of Council's intentions. And with that in mind, we presented the program and the costs of the program to Council on September the 23rd. And we've made all of those adjustments that I mentioned a few slides ago in accordance with the DC legislation, and all of those calculations are set out in the background study. This chart just gives a cost summary for the general services on the left and the roads on the right. So we're looking over the next 10 years of about $12 million in costs for the general services, of which only about $5 million are brought into the development charges. So a substantial portion of those costs relate to benefits to existing shares, the 10%, and some quite large pieces of infrastructure that will provide a benefit beyond 2028. And on the road side, it's costs of over $14 million, just over $14 million between now and 2031. Some quite substantial grants funding for some of those projects, $1.8 million, and some quite substantial benefits that will accrue to existing town residents as well, $5.8 million. So of the $14 million, about $6.5 brought forward into the development charge calculation. And you can see details about these calculations in Appendix B for the general services and Appendix C for the roads. So this then shows you the maximum charges that you could impose. I should stress, of course, that council can impose whatever charge it wants. In fact, it could pass. It has no requirement to have a development charge at all, but you cannot charge more than what we're showing here. And so the maximum rates then is $8,679 for a single or a semi-detached unit, and then there are lower charges for the smaller unit types. And the vast majority of those charges is going towards funding the roads and the indoor recreation and parking services. You'll note, too, on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the 44%. That represents that portion of the charge that will fall away once the new legislation takes hold. And on the non-residential side, this is essentially, I don't know why that says category name, but it doesn't on my sheet. It's essentially a roads charge. So the biggest portion of the pie is the roads, and it's a $61.36 charge per square meter of new floor area for a non-residential development. And only 4% of that charge would fall away under the new legislative scheme. So only the fire, which is the light blue, and the roads, which is the dark blue, would remain. This chart compares the maximum charge that's been calculated with the rates that are currently in force. So the column saying current charge is what you currently charge. And then the second column of figures shows you the charge that could have been imposed in 2015, indexed to current dollars. And so the difference is actually between, the difference shown here is in fact the difference between what was calculated last time and what was calculated this time. So it's a $1,600 increase from what was calculated last time, but of course it represents more than double your current charge. The differences vary quite substantially from service to service, so with the exception of indoor rec and roads, the differences are fairly minor, but the recreation charge is coming down quite substantially, and the reason is that the vast majority of that charge is related to paying off debt on the Canada Summit Centre, and the more that debt gets paid off, the less that charge becomes. And on the road side, there are some major increases, and the reason is simply that we are putting forward a more substantial capital program than from 5 years ago. And on the non-residential side, the current charge is about $11 a square meter. The maximum charge you could have imposed was about double that, just under $20 a square meter. And the calculated charge is quite substantive, just over $61 a square meter, all the increase related to the roads. The next couple of charts give you a sense of how these rates compare to some of your neighbors and some jurisdictions a bit further afield. So you'll see there's municipalities here, certainly in the district, but there are municipalities to the north, some slower growing municipalities that have some lower charges or no charges at all, in the case of Parry Sound and Seguin. And then as you move south, particularly to the sort of faster growing areas in Simcoe County, you'll see that the charges are quite substantial. The blue component of the bars is the charges that are imposed by upper tier municipalities, and the green is what's imposed at the lower tier level. And so the current charge in Huntsville is the bottom blue arrow, so near the bottom end of the range. And the fully calculated charge for the residential, this is for single detached units, would push you up to that mid-range, and more or less the same relative position had you imposed the full charge the last time. And on the non-residential side, it's a bit more of a difference, certainly. The current charge you have in place puts you quite near the lower end of the range. Gravenhurst and Bracebridge, you'll see, do not impose any non-residential charges at all. And the fully calculated charge this time around would put you well up into the mid-range of the charges that you see here. In terms of the bylaw provisions, most of them are more or less the same. So there are statutory exemptions that are required under the legislation. So land owned and used by municipalities and school boards do not pay DCs. There are limited exemptions for people who want to expand or add to an existing dwelling, or create a dwelling within an existing dwelling, or enlarge an industrial building by 50% or less of the existing building. And then over and above the statutory exemptions, the town has imposed, and we've assumed will continue to provide an exemption for all buildings in the community improvement plan area, for accessory apartment dwellings in new dwellings. These are conditional on some of the conditions I've put up there. And then where development puts in a sprinkler system, then they are exempt from paying the fire services development charge as well. The exemptions for secondary suites that you already have are in fact probably going to be, well, they will likely be redundant under the new legislation because that's now becoming a statutory exemption. So all secondary suites, whether they occur in new or existing dwellings, will be exempt under the new Bill 108 provisions once they take effect. We have not in the bylaw provided any discounts or phase-in of the maximum charges. But I know, I've just spoken to your treasurer just before this meeting, and I know that you're being presented with various options for providing exemptions or discounts, and I've seen them for the first time this evening, but I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have about them. The only thing I would say about discounts and exemptions, blanket discounts and exemptions on the rates, is that if you provide an exemption, you cannot increase the charges on other forms of development in order to pay for the revenue loss. So it's very important, I think, that council understands that any exemption or discount must be funded from a non-development charge source, and that will invariably be the property tax. We also discussed somewhat on September the 23rd the possibility of discounts or exemptions for industrial development. There are no such discounts or exemptions that are in the draft bylaw. And we also discussed on this, September the 23rd the merits of providing financial incentives to affordable housing outside the development charge framework. And through the new community improvement plan that I believe that the town is undertaking, if not now, then fairly quickly. And so the affordable housing rebate has been removed from the development charge framework with a view to providing those sorts of rebates and incentives through the community improvement plan. And then finally, this is the consultation process to date and moving forward. As I mentioned, we went to council on September the 23rd. The study was released soon after that, and the bylaw a few weeks ago. Moving forward from this public meeting, obviously happy to answer any questions from the public or council this evening, respond to any written submissions that we receive, with a view to bringing a final bylaw forward to council for its consideration and passage on December the 17th. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Stefan. All right, it's the public part now. Is there any person present wishing to provide comments or ask questions? Seeing none, that was quick. Are there any questions or comments from council to staff, the consultants, or any persons who have made a presentation? Council. Councillor Alcott.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I think I'm repeating myself, Stefan, but at the last meeting in September, just so I understand it correctly, if we don't pass this before the end of the year, then we lose the opportunity to cover the soft services, as you pointed out, until we put in place a community benefits bylaw or whatever we call that. Is that right? Am I getting it? It's really important from that perspective that if we want to cover those off, that we do something before the end of the year, or we wait till we've done something with the community benefits.
So through you, Madam Chair, yeah, it's really that the timing is a bit awkward. Your bylaw expires in March. And so in order to, as you say, get the rates in for all of the services, we would need to get a community benefits charge bylaw in by March. And we don't know what the requirements are yet because they haven't finished the regs. So there's a risk there. That's the bottom line.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Stephen, can we talk about Bill 108 for a moment? There were provisions, I know, and I read it, and I have been searching for it since we talked to the district, actually. I can't find it. But could you just outline for us some of the allowances under Bill 108 with regards to terms of length for payment of DCs?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So in addition to the soft service realignment, there will be some changes to the timing of collection and the administration of development charges. And it's somewhat of a moving target because 2 weeks ago, some of these provisions were changed again. But the bottom, as it stands right now, on the residential side, rental housing and nonprofit housing will have the charge that they have to pay fixed at the point of their application for a rezoning or a site plan. Right. And then they have 2 years in which they have 2 years after they get their approval of their zoning or site plan to get a building permit. And if they can do that, then they will pay the charge that was payable back when they first made their application. No, no. So then the second thing will be that rather than pay when their building permit is issued, they will pay in installments moving forward. So for nonprofit housing, for rental housing, it's in 6 annual installments from the first date of occupancy. And for nonprofit housing, it's 21 years of annual installments from the date of occupancy.
Those are the only, excuse me, Madam Deputy Mayor, but those are the only provisions in with regards to extending payment periods then?
So that's on the
Illinois?
residential side, and then on
Yeah.
the non-residential side, those same provisions were going to apply to commercial, industrial, and institutional.
Right.
And now it will only be institutional as of 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. So that's changed since we talked last?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thanks. Wait for the final one.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Stefan, you mentioned that the rates that were calculated here were the maximum that were contemplated. So the maximum that we can contemplate were in these charts.
Yes.
My question is on slide number 10, where you have the flow chart, steps to calculating DCs. And just to be clear, you start development forecast, you go down, then you hit that band that goes across that includes available DC reserves. So is that, so you're adding things up and then you're subtracting that entire line? Am I reading that right?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So I wouldn't read that band going across as a matter of adding and subtracting. So certainly when it comes to the available DC reserves, we subtract what you already have on hand that you have already collected that's available to fund those costs.
So we should spend those right now?
To the extent that you spend them, to the extent that you have them, the charge comes down. Let's put it that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions? I have one. There was a slide, I think it was the second last one, that said on the new regulations that there would be no discounts allowed, and yet we are talking about a potential discount on development charges for ourselves here. Can you explain that slide and how that pertains to what we're planning to do, possibly?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear at all. This slide was attempting to describe what's being proposed in the draft bylaw that was released a couple of weeks ago. So the new legislation still allows you to provide discounts and exemptions, but in the draft that was released, we haven't tried to preempt any decision that council might make. So what you see in the draft bylaw is the maximum rates right now.
Okay, thank you. And further to that, generally, do most municipalities discount their development charges, or do most municipalities not?
Well, Madam Chair, that's not an easy question to answer. And I'm not sure you'd get any useful information if I said 60% didn't. Really the way it works is the municipalities that are fast growing tend to impose the full charges. They have to build quickly, and they need the stream of money to do it. As you move further away from the fast-growing regions of the province, you tend to see discounts and exemptions that are more broad, i.e. less targeted to specific types of development. So blanket discounts on residential or non-residential, for example. And I would say in Muskoka, you're probably sort of in that middle band, where it some do and some don't.
Okay. Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You're aware of what happened last week at District with the DC conversation? Are you?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, I wasn't there. My colleague, Craig Binning, is heading up that study, but so he did inform me of some of the discussions, but I don't know the details of them.
Okay, so we did a big discount.
Oh, I'm aware of the
Yeah,
result.
The
of
result,
vote.
yeah,
Yes,
that's
I
what I
am,
was
yeah.
asking
Yes,
if you
I
were
am.
aware of. You didn't need to
Yeah.
give me the blow-by-blow. I was there too. So.
Yes, I'm sure.
So that in mind, when we look at the growth that we're experiencing here with that, is your recommendation for us to go to the maximums of what has been presented here?
So,
Or do you
Madam
have
Chair, I'm not going to
You're not going to
recommend
recommend?
anything to you.
Okay. I thought I could trick you into recommending something.
I don't think it's my position to recommend anything. This is a matter of policy more than anything else. But perhaps I should restate too. I mean, it's a difficult position because you get to the point in this process where essentially, you've got three options. Either you look at the maximum rate and you say, well, this is what we need to build, and this is the money we need to build it, and we're going to impose the rate to pay for it. Or you look at that rate and you say it's too high, our local development industry cannot support it. So either we discount the rate and we fund the difference from the property taxpayer, or we look at the capital works and we say, we're going to cut back on what we're going to build. And those are fundamentally your three options. And often, neither one of them are easy.
Any other questions? Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, when you talk about discounts, is there an average across the board that you see discounts at, or is it just by municipality and by?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, I mean, you'll see from the chart the bar chart that I showed, you can see there's a huge range. And a lot of what you see are in fact discounted charges. Yeah, so no, I wouldn't say that there's a pattern.
Councillor Fitzgerald?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terzino. Stefan, do you anticipate them really delivering these regs by January 1st, 2020?
Well, Madam Chair, I'd said to Mr. Binning, my partner, last week, if they don't deliver it by this Friday, there's no way we can do this by the 1st of January. So I honestly am very surprised it's taken this long.
So we're in a good position developing new DC policy until the time that this benefit comes into play.
I would say, Councillor, that you should not be basing your decision on what might happen at the provincial level right now.
Good. So the decision we arrived at your last visit here.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Hang on. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair, Mayor. Stefan, I don't know if you were aware of this. I know you heard the results from your partner, that we did agree to a 50% discount. It was quite a split vote there. But there's also since then been a reconsideration request for our next meeting at District. So if it does get reconsidered, how is that going to impact on January 1st, if the province does get its act together?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, again, speaking from a position of relative ignorance of the district process, I would say that if the district can't pass a bylaw by the 1st of January, then it will be stuck with having to pass development charges only for the hard services, which would be I think at the district level, most of the charge is the water and sewer. So you'd probably be looking at a road, sewer, water charge fundamentally.
Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Further to Councillor Thompson, I mean, it's unlikely the reconsideration is going to go through because it needs 2/3 of the vote. So I'm pretty sure that what we passed is going to stand. So I don't know that it's. We can wager.
Okay, are we done with questions? All right, thank you. So now that all comments have been received, I declare this public meeting to be concluded. And now we get to the fun part, and that's dealing with development charges. I have a resolution to put on the table, moved by Councillor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that staff be directed to prepare a bylaw for development charges to be presented to Council on December 17th, 2019 for adoption. And further that the rates to be included in the bylaw shall be as follows. And we have options. So for residential, we have an option, charge the residential rate at the full calculated rate. Charge the residential rate at a discount of 42.5%, charge the residential rate at a discount of 30%. And in the non-residential rate option, we have A, charge the non-residential rate at the full calculated rate, charge the non-residential at the existing rate under the current bylaw, and C, charge the non-residential rate at a discount of 65%. So, that's open for discussion. Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Madam Chair Terziano. One comment I would make, and this is a comment I also made at district, was I don't think we should increase any of the non-residential rates over what we currently charge, simply because that represents jobs in our community. I think we're seeing the statistics show massive growth in residential areas, and areas such as ours, we need employment and we need jobs. And there is speaking from a business owner that's growing out of his space, there is not a lot of great space available in this community. And I wouldn't support anything that discouraged growth in that area. As far as the residential rates, I would support, probably the 30% discount, although I could be swayed. Thank you.
Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I further to what Councillor Withey said, I support Councillor Withey with respect to the non-residential, similar to the comments that you raised with respect to the, currently we are running out of some certain types of spaces, and we are seeing some growth in that area, certainly applications that have come forward, so I wouldn't like to dissuade what's happening because of that. And the arguments were certainly put forward, as you said, at the district last week. On the residential side, I feel I'm not in support of the full load. Having said that, I do hear the comments that, you know, this council has made a concerted effort to raise the number of capital projects in the roads department. And we all feel really strongly that we want to put more money into that budget, and we are moving on a number of projects. And when you look at the presentation that was before us, so much of it was roads related. So there's part of me, while I don't support the full ask, I think probably I'm supporting, I think it's option C of the first part, which is in reference to a 30% reduction.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Could we find, or could we get someone on staff to give us an idea what percentage increase it would mean at 30% reduction, 42% reduction compared to our present rate?
I can answer that for you. The 42.5% reduction is our current rate.
Okay.
That's what we're discounting at now.
Yeah.
So 30% discount would be basically 12% increase.
Okay. All right, I think in that case then, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'd probably be okay with the 30%. And in terms of the non-residential, I follow the lead of my two previous speakers on council, and I'd be okay with that as well. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or any other suggestions? Councillor Withey?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. Just for clarity, so the 30% discount is off of and I'm on the chart here,
Okay.
the 8679, which drops that by 2,600 and change.
Yep.
So it represents an increase of 2,000, some give or take.
Yep.
Am I doing that math right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Alcock?
I may have been a bit quick on the non-residential side. I still, support what I said, but then I looked at the slide with respect to the non-residential rate, and if we left it, and we're talking about the current rate, I think that's what we talked about, the current rate for non-residential. And the current rate is incredibly low. And so there's part of me that thinks maybe you could read the three options for the non-residential again.
Sure. The current non-residential rate is roughly $10 a square meter.
And
The full calculated rate is roughly $61 a square meter. So we are discounting commercial probably to about 85% almost right now, currently.
right,
Do you want this slide up? Because I'll move out of the way if you do.
that would be
And
helpful.
then, I think our treasurer might want to come up and speak as well.
I think that would be very helpful, because I actually am not suggesting, I think I'm suggesting that we actually raise that, not to the level that's being proposed, but raise it. It is incredibly low if you look at the comparative piece.
So this is the resolution before us.
Right.
42.5% on residential discount is where we're currently at.
Right.
It doesn't have, the non-residential current charge is $10 and change. Julia, do you want to speak to, I know there was a question before that you wanted to speak to.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify just on the different options. So charging the full residential rate at the full calculator rate, that would be the $8,679. So right now we're on our current one, we're charging 42.5%. So if we did that on the new one, the amount would actually be, the new charge would be $4,990. So it would be an increase of 25% over what we currently charge. And then the option number 3 for residential at 30%, that would actually work out to be $6,075 based on the new calculated charge.
Just for clarity, I think you said we were charging 42.5%, but we're actually discounting it, correct? The number
yeah,
you
we're
gave was a discount?
So we're discounting the existing 2015 maximum charge at 42.5%. So if we did that on the revised charge, it would actually be $4,990. So it would be about a $900 increase.
Thank you. So, Julie, if you wouldn't mind walking us through the non-residential rate option as well, that would be great.
So the first option, charging at the full rate, would be the $61 or the $61.36 per meter square. The next one would be keeping at the current rate, which is $10.87 a square meter. And that's what people the existing pay. And the discount of 65% would be pretty much doubling what people currently charge.
So 20.
It's about $22.
So, if I may, is that all right? So, I guess then I would continue to support option C for the residential rate option. And I would consider supporting option C again for the non-residential if it brings it up to 22, so almost double what, or actually a little more than double what they're currently paying.
Okay. Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I would support what my colleague Nancy Alcock just stated. I think that what we're seeing is Huntsville leading the way with growth in all sectors, and I don't think that I just don't feel comfortable keeping the massive discounts in place if it ends up on the backs of the current taxpayer. So I'd be in support of that, 100%.
Okay. Are there any other? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm just looking at the non-residential rates now for our neighbors to the south, Gravenhurst and Bracebridge. Are they comparable? They would be comparable to our about $10 a square meter rate now, I think, Julie, or the $10.81 a meter right now. That looks like on this chart I'm looking at, that would be exactly where they're at.
So for Bracebridge and Gravenhurst, I believe they don't charge a lower tier for non-residential. That would only be the upper tier portion.
Exactly, you're right. And so by doubling what we're doing then, we're really putting ourselves, I think, in a disadvantage comparatively with Bracebridge and Gravenhurst. And I just wondered, do we really want to do that at this point? And the other thing, I guess, when I'm looking at the residential discount rate, the 42.5% is based on what would be today's allowable maximum, not based on what was 2015, right?
Well, it's a percentage, so it would be a percentage of
what's
either
allowable
rate. Yeah.
today. So, yeah, so I'm sort of backtracking on that one as well, so, yeah.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. So the point Councillor Thompson brought up, I would reiterate my desire to, it's gone off the chart, I forget which, I don't want an increase in non-residential rates for that reason. We're doubling it. It is a rate, so it's times something to get to a dollar amount. And if our neighbors to the south are charging zero, I don't think it puts us in a favorable position if we want to attract jobs here and companies here and industry here, which I think we do, because we don't want to become we love retirees, but I don't think that's exactly what we want to become solely. And I think that's important. I would like to, Councillor Thompson, at the end of his last statement, I wasn't clear on where you stood on the residential rates. You were backtracking, but to where? I didn't.
Well, basically, Councillor Withey, if I may, Deputy Mayor, the 42.5% discount is based on what is the maximum allowable today, and I was thinking earlier it would be the maximum on the 2015 rate, but it's actually what would be the maximum allowable today. So it would still give us a substantial increase in our local DC, would it not, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to Julia?
Julia?
For option B, for the residential rate, for the discount of 42.5, it would increase for a single semi by about $990.
Okay, all right.
And just for clarity, the 30% would increase it from today's
By about $2,000.
About 2,000. So the two rates on the residential, you're looking at a $900 increase versus a $2,000 increase. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious. You mentioned district earlier on the development charges. What type of discount are they looking at, or are they even looking at a discount?
They passed a resolution to discount their rates 50% on residential and to freeze commercial. Councillor Alcock, did you have another question? Sure.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I guess, and I think I know the answer, but I can't remember, and that is, did both Ravenhurst and Bracebridge recently pass their updated DC bylaw? Or is that, do you know, Julia?
I believe that they both passed it earlier this year. We all went together to do this process, and we were the
Right.
last ones on the...
Okay, so it is new. All right.
Councillor Weed?
I'd like to put a motion on the floor to defer this to the December 17th meeting, this decision.
You can do that. The only drawback to that is that if we don't prepare and pass a bylaw on December 17th, we will miss the window of opportunity.
I recognize that. Why
Hang
not?
on one second.
Well,
So our direction now is to prepare a bylaw for the 17th, and we can't do it on the 17th. We'd have to have a special council meeting prior to the 17th. Sure, please do.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. So just to confirm, and the clerk can correct me if this is wrong, but with respect to amendments to bylaw, so we have a bylaw, we will prepare a bylaw for the 17th. You can only do administrative amendments to it, which would not include amending the percentage that council's agreed to. So when the bylaw is presented on the 17th, that can't be amended within the bylaw. So we would have to have a special meeting to give direction to prepare the bylaw.
if I may,
Please do.
can we hold a special meeting after that meeting to pass a bylaw?
After the 17th? No. No, we would in all likelihood have to have a special meeting the week before the 17th to discuss what we're discussing now and provide the direction to the 17th. So what you're really proposing is we defer this discussion.
December 17th.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I think to heed the advice of our consultant is prudent for us to do at this point. If we prolong this and the community benefit charges don't come into play when they're supposed to come into play, we have, albeit reduced charges for development. I think we need the revenue for the capital projects we have planned currently. And for us to put this off any further, if we miss that deadline, it's too much revenue to miss out on. I'm comfortable making a decision today. I have enough information, and I think we should move forward.
Okay, does anybody have can I ask for a suggestion as to what option we put in here and then call a vote? Madam Clerk? Yeah. Okay, would a member like to suggest one of the options in both the residential rate and the non-residential rate so that we can have a vote? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to propose 42.5% residential discount and the status quo maintaining the present rate in non-residential.
So you're proposing option B in both. So I guess we have to vote on that then? Yeah. So your proposal is option B in both?
Yes.
Okay. If there are any questions, now's the time, otherwise I'm going to call the vote. Or an amendment. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Okay. Thank you. All right, we're moving into regular minutes. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withey and seconded by Councillor Weed. Be it resolved that the following council meeting minutes be hereby adopted as printed and circulated: October 28th, 2019 regular meeting and November 12th, 2019 special council meeting. Questions? All in favor? It's carried. So, reports for information only. Aspiden Community Hall Ad Hoc Committee, Councillor Schumacher, the October 9th and November 13th meetings.
Yes, the meetings are there for you to review. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Okay. Huntsville Public Library Board, October 17th, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, indeed. We're in the process still of replacing our CEO, and we're getting close. We'll have announcements in the very, very short term with regards to our progress in that area, but I think we're definitely on the right track, and we're closing ground, as they say. I'd just like to pay tribute, though, to our library board members who have all done such an incredible job stepping in to help during this whole process, and every one of them has been involved to a great degree. I mean, everything from, the regular running of the library and meetings and so on and so forth, but some have taken on the responsibility of renovations and so on and so forth, and things are really, really being done over there. So anyway, we have an incredible library board, and I just like to pay tribute to them and all the work they're doing. And we are getting close to a CEO, so can't make that announcement tonight, but we expect to have news in a positive sense very, very soon. Thank you.
Questions? No? The Huntsville Downtown BIA Board of Management meeting from October 17th, and I was actually away for that meeting, but I just quickly looked at the minutes, and I don't really have anything to highlight there. It was regular business. Committee of Adjustment, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Quiet meeting. We had 2 applications. Both were approved. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, and finally, Huntsville Lake Bay's Chamber of Commerce update. Councillor Weed.
Actually, thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. Our meeting is this coming Wednesday, so nothing to report.
Okay. All right. Development Services. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Alcock and seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that the Development Services Committee meeting minutes dated November 13th, 2019, and the recommendations contained therein be hereby adopted as printed and circulated, with the exception of recommendation number Development 17719 and recommendation number Development 18019 to be pulled and voted on separately. Councillor Alcock.
Thank you for that. I can be brief. In addition to the 2 pulled items, the committee passed 2 zoning amendments with respect to rural residential development. We supported or recommended 2 site plan amendments, and we had a very interesting presentation from Melissa Markham, who's the Director of Planning at the Township of Lake Bays, about the use of their community planning permit system. And while that sounds kind of dry in its title, it wasn't dry to us because it is something that now that our official plan here in the town of Huntsville has been approved, we're looking to the next step, and the next step is drafting a new zoning bylaw, but we're also looking at the idea of preparing a community planning permit system, which, if is done correctly, which is what we heard from Melissa, can create a lot of efficiencies in the planning and development process. At least that would be our hope. So her presentation was really timely and really important. We had a quick presentation from our chief building official with respect to the province's transforming and modernizing the delivery of Ontario's building code. And they're proposing to make some radical alterations as to the enforcement of the building code. And so we supported our chief building official in his request to provide a lengthy commentary from our municipality to the province with respect to some of the proposed changes. We have some concerns, and he shared them with us. And so that's what he's going to do. I think that's, we did support the creation of 2 reserve funds for the purposes of economic development. Both seem to be a very good idea with our new revenue line coming from our municipal accommodation tax. So while we're figuring out some of the programs that we want to support, we thought that that was a good idea from an administrative perspective. And then the last thing we did support, including in our 2020, or discussing the inclusion of the continuation of our summer parking ambassador, because we thought that was a really good program. And so we were looking at including that in our 2020 budget, or at least considering that as part of the budget. And that's it.
Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. All right, I have a resolution, and now I feel sorry for you, Councillor Alcock, at planning when you have to read these. Moved by Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Weed. Be it resolved that Council approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 29, 2019 HTE, and further that the zoning on 100 Treasure Island be changed from a conservation holding CH zone to a shoreline residential 5 SR5 zone with exceptions 1 and 2, and to a conservation C zone with exceptions 1 and 3. Exception number 1, notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P as amended, the minimum lot area shall be in accordance with Schedule 9 as amended. Exception number 2, notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P as amended, the maximum permitted primary dwelling footprint shall be 250 square meters, 2,700 square feet, inclusive of any attached decks and stairs. No site alteration is permitted prior to the granting of site plan approval. Exception number 3, notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P as amended, the only permitted uses shall be a dock and boathouse, and development shall only occur along the reaches of shoreline identified as activity areas. The entire shoreline shall remain in an undisturbed state, with the exception of a 3.5 meter wide meandering pathway permitted to be cleared between the stretch of shoreline designated as a shoreline activity area and the building envelope of each lot. No structures other than a dock and boathouse shall be permitted within the shoreline activity area. The remainder of the land shall remain in a natural state with no structural development or clearing of vegetation. All development shall be as illustrated in Schedule 9 as amended. And further that the zoning on 200 Treasure Island be changed from a conservation holding CH zone to a shoreline residential 5 SR5 zone with exceptions 1 and 3, and to a conservation zone with exceptions 1 and 2. Exception number 2, notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P as amended, the maximum permitted primary dwelling footprint shall be a 250 square meter, 2,700 square foot inclusive of any attached decks and stairs. No site alteration shall occur until a site plan approval is granted. Exception number 3, notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P as amended, the only permitted uses shall be a dock and boathouse, and development shall only occur along the reaches of shoreline identified as activity areas. The entire shoreline shall remain in an undisturbed state with the exception of a 3.5 wide meandering pathway permitted to be cleared between the stretch of shoreline designated as a shoreline activity area and the building envelope of each lot. No structures other than a dock and boathouse shall be permitted within the shoreline activity area. The remainder of the land shall remain in a natural state with no structural development or clearing of vegetation. All development shall be as illustrated in Section 9 as amended. And further that the zoning be changed on 600 North Wasiosa Lake Road from a shoreline residential SR5 zone to a shoreline residential SR5 zone with exception notwithstanding any provisions of zoning bylaw 2008-66P is amended. A waterfront landing shall be an additional permitted use. A 3-meter wide vegetative buffer shall be provided along the southerly interior side lot line. A 3-meter interior side yard setback shall be provided for all parking areas along the southerly interior side lot line. A 30-meter deep vegetative buffer shall be provided abutting the waterfront landing area in accordance with Schedule 9 as amended. The maximum activity area width for the waterfront landing shall be 7.7 meters. The waterfront landing shall be designated in accordance with Schedule 9 as amended. A 10-meter southerly interior side yard setback shall be provided for the permitted dock and boat ramp associated with the waterfront landing. This was a pulled resolution, and I'm going to ask Councillor Fitzgerald if he would like to speak to that.
I would like to speak to that. I didn't actually ask the motion be pulled, but I did not support this in its original form as an application, although staff did an excellent job in performing their duties and working with the applicant, and several efforts were made to make further compromises. So I think I would like to have a wholesome discussion around the table and ask for support to deny the application.
And I'm sorry, Councillor Weeb, I realize you pulled it, but as a seconder, would you like to speak to it next?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I've had a couple of weeks, as it would be, to reflect on all that was done, all that was said. This application, it's been close to a year now that it's been in the works. And after many meetings and many consultations and much research, this is where we arrived at, which was 2 weeks ago. And a lot happened in that meeting. There was a lot of information, and there was a lot to ponder. I'll say that after the meeting, I took a lot of time to really take in what was said, and frankly, I have come myself to a point where I don't know that I can support this motion as it is. Some of the statements were borderline absurd and maybe offensive in that meeting, and given the time to really consider the full weight of everything that was said, I can no longer support this motion. So I will be voting in denial.
Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I actually was quite pleased when I saw that this item was pulled. And for a number of the reasons that I will echo what Councillor Weeb said. It has been a long process. There's been a lot of information. And at the last meeting, it was a split vote. And I did vote in favor of it because I thought that the staff did an excellent job trying to meet all of the interests involved in this file. But it was a protracted discussion at that same meeting, and I felt like maybe I called the vote prematurely. Maybe we had more room for further discussion. I'm not sure. All I know is that post the meeting, I have also reflected on that decision, and I feel quite strongly now that I can't support the recommendation that was before us 2 weeks ago.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did not support this motion 2 weeks ago, and I still do not support it today. I believe back in 2006, I think it was the first zoned conservation was due to the threshold of the lake. 13 years later, the lake is better, but I still think this could be detrimental to the lake. And I think we all, serve the people of Huntsville, Port Sidney, and Artisan to save our lakes and waterways and stuff like this. And I can't see supporting this today or in the future.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This property, or this Treasure Island, it did have that conservation zoning, right, prior to, and I'm just wondering how that happened in the first place. There seems to be no history of or any consultation with the owners of the island, which I guess are the ones that made this application now. Was there any consultation back then when it was deemed or designated as conservation? I'm curious as to the history of that. I know that however we go on this, if we turn this down, we are going to be into an OMB fight or the TPAP, whatever the iteration of that is. We're going to be into that, I know. And fine, we've been there before. What the heck, eh? Are we talking 3 lots here? We're talking 2 on the island and 1 on the, but at 600? I'm getting the impression we're talking about 3 lots here, are we not?
Yeah. Yes,
One-
2 on the island and 1 on the mainland.
And 1 on the mainland, and I know the property owners own a significant shore, a piece of the east side of Lake Wasiosa. And I'm just wondering if we turn this down, if we turn down all 3 lots, like the 1 might have merit, maybe the 2 don't, but maybe the 1 does. So what would be the process in dealing with that? Could I get an answer to that from someone?
I guess you'd have to be more specific as to what you were thinking of turning down and what you were thinking
Well,
of not.
if we were to follow the lead of our chair and the 3 councillors that have spoken on it so far, and turn down this resolution, that would also turn down the 3 lots, and I'm just wondering if that might be fair with the island, or where the island is concerned. Would that be fair at the 600 North Wasiosa Lake Road zone? Am I confusing the issue here?
600 lot is a water access lot to get to the island. So if the island isn't developable, there'd be no need for that lot to be rezoned.
It wouldn't be.
Right. Councillor Withy?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I don't sit on this committee, although I have heard from a number of people and have certainly read through all the documents that have been considered all the way along. I kind of have a flashback to the Golf Course Road property that we dealt with back in 2012, I think. And for me, this comes down to basic right and wrong, and I think this is wrong, and I will not support it.
Okay, I'm going to also just say that at the Planning Committee meeting, I supported the resolution, although with the caveat that I said I would prefer the island to remain conservation, but was hoping to find a compromise that would work for everyone and keep us out of the OMB. Given that I said that at the time, I appreciate the passion of the residents on Lake Wasiosa, and I appreciate the size of the lake and the fact that we are potentially going to damage it if we let further development go there. So I'm quite prepared to change my vote and vote to deny this as well. So with that, I think I am going to call a question, unless there's anybody else that wants to speak. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I just wondered if Councillor Thompson wanted some further explanation on the thought process before we call the vote.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it was explained to me. I think I'm confused about the 600 Northwest Lake Road. I was thinking that was just based on what I was reading here in the resolution, that was also an application for a building lot there as well, but it was just more of an access point. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this resolution is for approval. All in favor? Opposed? Is that an okay process? Yep. That's, so what's carried? Oh, defeated, okay. That's defeated. Thank you. Okay. The other pulled resolutions from planning, moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Alcock. Be it resolved that committee approved the short-term rental accommodation licensing bylaw attached as Schedule D to Report Development 2019-269, and further that municipal accommodation tax bylaw 2018-131 be amended to include short-term rental accommodations effective April 1st, 2020. And further that staff be directed to initiate a zoning amendment for short-term rental accommodations as a temporary use attached to Schedule C. And further that staff be directed to proceed with the hiring of a short-term rental coordinator to be included in the 2020 budget and to be fully funded through licensing fees. All right. I also have a motion. Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald, would you like to speak to that before I read the motion to amend?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I think upon reflection that I had a lot of contact from constituents regarding some minor issues with some of the wording and some of the background presented in the report. I think staff did an excellent job on the report, and we had a very wholesome conversation about it at operations. And I think that maybe there's still some fine-tuning to be done and further discussion to be had before we make the decision.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Alcock and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that Recommendation 18019, Report Development 2019-269, Short-Term Accommodation Rentals, Proposed Licensing and Zoning Bylaws be referred back to the Development Services Committee to further review policies with respect to restrictions on secondary suites as proposed in the draft Short-Term Accommodation Rentals Bylaw. Councillor Alcock, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I should, first and foremost, I still support the proposed bylaw that was presented to our committee. But as Councillor Fitzgerald said, there have been some issues raised with respect to the restrictions that we're imposing on the secondary suites for a lot of very good reasons. And I believe our staff, who did an excellent job on this, by the way, did propose some possible amendments to the bylaw that's before us tonight. And I think that's great. But rather than get into a full-on discussion tonight on those details, I would prefer it if we could have that discussion back at Development Services to get this particular bylaw right. It's a very important one, and a lot of people are waiting for it, and I just think that that's the appropriate place for the further discussion on it.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. First of all, I'm totally in agreement with this process here, but I'm wondering if maybe Councillor Alcock or Fitzgerald could elaborate on what your misgivings are at this point, like what's missing, and maybe what should be included to make this wholesome, in your opinion.
Thank you for that, Councillor Thompson. We have heard from a number of people that do already have Airbnb on secondary suites or units within their house. We're proposing that we're fairly restrictive around that and saying that if you have, we don't want to take secondary suites off the long-term rental market because of our affordable housing crisis, right? So we've heard from people and said, listen, we're really responsible. We've been running this, and so are you now saying that we can't do this at all? And we actually are talking about a process, but they would have to go through another process, their own zoning amendment, and it would be fairly costly. And maybe that's the right way to go, but I think we need some more conversation around that. That was a fairly specific issue, and it might come back just the same, but I think that we need to have a more fulsome discussion around that.
Okay, all in favor of sending this back to committee? That's carried. See this one? I just leave? Okay. All right, I think if council would like, we'll take a 5-minute break. We've been at it for 2 hours now, 5 minutes, and then we'll resume. Yeah. Counselor Fitzgerald? Okay, where did we lead off? Okay, we're going to reports from municipal officers. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Withey. Be it resolved that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, Call to Action Number 57, Education for Public Servants on the History of Indigenous Peoples, be made a training priority as appropriate resources are available. Ms. Suda, did you want to come and speak briefly to these next two reports?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor Truziano. The reports are in front of you. I believe they are fairly self-explanatory, so I would just like to ask if people have questions about them. I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, questions of council? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Don't go away, Terry, because we have your next one. And that's moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Withey. Be it resolved that the 2019 interim corrected land acknowledgement statement as outlined in report CS 2019-30 be adopted for use in the town of Huntsville area. And further that the manager of Arts, Culture and Heritage communicate this to known people and organization who used Huntsville's previous land acknowledgement statement. And further that the General Committee recommendation GC 19217 be rescinded. Terry?
Again, this is the report is in front of you. It is to redress a known error that we've known about since about 2018 in our acknowledgement statement. We have been giving people the correct statement, but we've been doing that without a motion of council. So this is to affect that, and as we know more, we will do better.
Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Withey. Be it resolved that council support the submission of an expression of interest through intake 1 of the Municipal Modernization Program for the completion of a community services master plan, which will include an operational review. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. So as council's aware, we did receive some funding in the spring, just over $604,000, which was a one-time modernization fund. The intent of that was for municipalities to find efficiencies and potential cost savings. A report was delivered to council whereby it was recommended that we not spend all of those funds until we found out what happened with the regional government review. Although a small portion of that was committed to replace a cartograph system, we still have the uncommitted amount of $504,000 in that account. We've recently found out in October, Minister Clark announced that there would not be any forced amalgamations. Therefore, I'm of the opinion that we could consider what we would do with that money. In addition to that, Minister Clark did also announce that there would be additional funding that would help municipalities find efficiencies and cost savings, which resulted in the Municipal Modernization Program. So with that money, there's quite a large amount of money available, $125 million to small and rural municipalities to help in both of those areas. So what we did as a senior management team is we reviewed the list of strategic plan items, and we pulled a list of those items which are in the report that could potentially fall under the criteria of the program. Unfortunately, the timelines for submission are very tight. We just found out 2 weeks ago that the funding was available, and we have to have an application submitted by December 9th, I think is the next day. So we have made a recommendation in the report to proceed with the Community Services Master Plan. It's something that was identified within the strategic plan and certainly is a good opportunity for us to hopefully get a consultant that can assist with that process. Council is aware that we did set up a committee that was going to work on that plan, but I'm very much of the opinion it's quite large in scope and it would be beneficial to have a consultant do it. So that's what's before Council this evening.
Questions? Councillor Alcock.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano, and thank you, CAO Corey, for that. That's very helpful. I do have a quick question. I certainly support the Community Master Plan. I think you justified as to why this would be related to efficiencies, and I'm pretty sure I get that, so I think that makes a whole lot of sense. You also made reference, I know we had a quick discussion around this at district last week, and I believe that CAO Dubin was going to have a meeting with all of the area municipalities to try and determine whether there might be a joint project. And so I think going forward with this community master plan project proposal doesn't negate working with the district and other municipalities on something like streamlining development approval, development and planning approvals processes. Is that, there's a question in there, right?
Yeah, for sure. So
Perfect.
through you,
Thank
Deputy Mayor. So we did actually have an area CAO discussion, and it was determined at that time to narrow down on a scope of a project in such a short period of time regionally was almost impossible. So what we decided to do is there are no restrictions in discussions with our municipal advisor. There are no restrictions on the number of intakes that you apply for. So intake 1, it was decided regionally that any municipality interested in applying could do so on their own. The area CAOs would then further discuss perhaps a regional approach that would have a benefit to the entire area, and then we would make an application under intake 2. So the other thing with the intakes is they are phased. Intake 1 is strictly for hiring a third-party consultant to assist with the review process. Intake 2 is you can hire a third party to do the review, or you can apply to actually implement. So what we would look at doing is if we were successful in intake 1, we would apply in intake 2 in hopes that we would get funding to actually implement the recommendations of the first phase. Regionally, we could do an intake 1 at the second phase, and then again at the third phase apply for funding to implement that. So it's sort of like a staggered process that we could enter into, but it would not negate the ability for us to enter a regional submission if we go independently.
Any other questions? Councillor Weed?
Sorry, just a quick comment. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I'm in full support of this. I think that biases aside, being Chair of Community Services, I do think that this is the most pressing need in terms of the overall operation, and I think this presents the best opportunity to find future modernization and efficiencies in our corporation. So I'm behind it 100%.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Information report about 12 Yonge Street North. Do you want to highlight anything, CAO?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. So the report is fairly detailed. As it states, direction was given to staff to negotiate the purchase of 12 Yonge Street North, which is where currently a hangar is located. Those discussions did take place. We are given parameters from council on the negotiation, which we were able to finalize the deal. And we have a bylaw coming later in the meeting that will secure the disposition of that land. So unless there's any questions, that's a summary. Question?
Okay. I have a I don't know who's that. That's Dion. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that Council approves the recommendations as outlined in Schedule A of Report CAO 2019-23, and further that the 2019-2023 Strategic Plan Resolution Number 25819 be amended to reflect the changes, and further that Resolution 31216 be hereby rescinded. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. So as council is aware, we did pass our strategic plan in September of this year. There was quite a number of priority items that were listed on the schedule. And what was supposed to take place at that point was staff were supposed to implement those priorities within their business plans. We did take a different approach this term. We have requested that staff complete a business plan for the remainder of this term of council, which they have done. So those will be forthcoming at the December council meeting when we discuss budget. However, when we did that, we realized that there was some duplications in priority items, and we also noted that there was some items that were really not actionable. So what I brought before you today is a recommendation on the amendment or removal of some of the items to our strategic plan, and that is the beauty with having a live living document, is we could add or we can take away fairly easily. So just looking for approval from council to the changes in Schedule A.
Questions? Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. Councillor Fitzgerald won't be surprised when I say that I want to revisit the one-way streets item near the bottom. It appears to be, I don't know if it appears to be proposed to be taken out of there, or if it just needs more meat on the bone. But I don't know if this is the time or place to do it, but I know exactly what we had in mind when we were discussing that.
Did you want to make it more specific to exactly what?
I would love to make it more specific. The idea was to examine the two streets to the south of us, so south of Main Street, so this would be High and Minerva and Princess, and you get it. It's those two streets to go one way and the other. That's about it.
MCO?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I would actually ask Julia McKenzie to comment on this. I do believe in part of our development charge, we speak to doing a study on one-way streets. Is that, if Julie could speak to that?
We have included that in our capital projects for the development charges, so if that is the clarification, we can certainly make note of that and add that.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, hang on, don't vote. Councillor Fitzgerald.
I just wanted to thank Councillor Wiebe for waking me up over here. No, we've been pushing for this for a long time, and I look forward to the study because I think it can alleviate some congestion problems and parking issues. So, thanks, Joe.
Now all in favor? That's carried. Okay. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Wiebe and seconded by Councillor Thompson. Be it resolved that Council, in accordance with subsection 263(1) of the Municipal Act 2001, hereby fills the vacancy for the office of mayor by option blank. Option choices are option A, appointment, a current member of council, directing the municipal clerk to solicit notice in writing from members of council to fill the vacancy, and that the names be considered at a council meeting to be held on December 17th, 2019. Option B, appointment by the candidate who ran for the position from the 2018 municipal election, directing the municipal clerk to bring back a report to the next council meeting outlining the results of the 2018 municipal election, along with their consent to fill the vacancy and confirmation by the municipal clerk on their eligibility to hold office. Option C, appointment call-out, directing the municipal clerk to solicit applications from qualified individuals to fill the vacancy, and that they may be considered at a council meeting to be held within the legislated timeframe. Option D, by-election, directing the municipal clerk to bring forward the necessary bylaw to hold a by-election to fill the vacancy, and adding the amount of $107,500 to the 2020 operating budget. Discussion. Councillor Thompson.
I guess someone has to start this, right? I'm going to put forward I guess, a motion, or at least a recommendation that we adopt option A. That would be an appointment from a current member of council. The reasons I have behind that, and primarily because, at least from my standpoint, is, and I don't even really want to talk about the costing of all of this, right? I mean, the costing is one option, and so on and so forth, and I know that's been kicked around in the on social media here, there, and everywhere. You know, the cost of democracy, as they say. But I think there are other, I guess the long-term thought of this is if we go by the option D, which is the by-election option, I mean, we could really, ostensibly and potentially be into 3 by-elections. We really could. And with the timeframes involved and the costs involved, we could be well into almost at the end of our second year of, or our third year, actually, roll into our third year, before we have a settled council at a cost of, now we're closing in on, $350,000 to settle our council. That was one thing I didn't want to talk about, but I ended up talking about it anyway. That's the financial end of it. I think the other side of it, I've been on council now for 19 years. I'm into my 20th year on council. And the argument has been put out there too by others, okay, like that a minority of members of council could determine our next mayor. And that's true. That could happen, I suppose. I've been on council to see some major decisions that were made by 3-2 votes, okay? Major decisions that had an impact on the community for a 50-year period. But they were made by a 3-2 vote because that was the majority of council and that was the sitting council, the sitting members of the day at that particular time type of thing. So the argument that council, as we're sitting here today, would not be responsible in making this kind of a decision, I think it doesn't hold water with me. I think that's what we're elected for. We have to make tough decisions. This is a tough decision, that's for sure. We have to make tough decisions, but I'm prepared fully to support option A. Thank you.
Sorry, who had their hand? Councillor Alcock?
Unless someone else had their hand up. Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I, like everybody around the table, and clearly I've given a lot of thought to this, and I've talked to many people. You know, I pose the question with people I meet and I know, and debate the issues by-election versus appointment. And I certainly understand that, you know, when people say it's a really important part of democracy that people have the right to have a say, and certainly when it comes to the leader of council, you know, people, I hear that, and but I am also going to say that I am very supportive of option A, which is the appointment of a current member of council. But if people will humor me, I've worked this through in my own mind, why I believe this is still a very democratic way to go about it. And that is, one, people look at it and they say, by-election or appointment. But we're really fortunate that we have that third option, which is appointment from within. So within, which is this known quantity here, that we all went through an election in 2018. And so some will say, yeah, but that's not good enough because you're all councillors, you're whatever, and it's important on the mayor, the role of the mayor. And I look at it and I say, well, we're also fortunate, and I don't think every council could say this, and that is that we have a number of people around this table who I think would be excellent mayors. And we have at least two of them who have said they have expressed some interest in that. So again, we're fortunate. Not all councils would have that opportunity. So I look at that and say, well, we have that on that side. And then I look at the idea of the by-election, and I say, well, the note says that probably the earliest date that we'd be able to hold a by-election would put us at the end of March next year. So the idea that we have 3 years left in the mandate, which I hear, I understand that too, it's not really 3 years left in the mandate. And the other, if we decided to go by-election, we know that, again, because we understand a couple of people have expressed an interest, excuse me, what happens at around this table and in our administration is some people will be focused on processing that by-election. And a lot of the decisions that we've been making, and this is my most important point that I haven't got to yet, will probably be put in a hold zone because we don't know the outcome of the by-election. So decisions that we agreed to at the beginning of this new council may actually go on hold while we go through this process. And I'm not sure that, I think this is, as I said, the most important point from my perspective. I believe since the last election, we've got a very solid mandate. And we have that in a couple of ways. One, when our council was appointed, our mayor issued mandate letters for each of us around this table. And in the mandate letters formed all kinds of policy direction that he felt he heard when he ran for mayor, and what we also discussed around this table and what he heard, and discussions with all of us, what we heard from the public. So we have those mandate letters, and the effective date of those letters is from now, the beginning of this term, to the end of this term. And that affects all of the decisions we make in all of the different departments. So we, in fact, have been doing that. The second part of what I believe is our leadership direction and our marching orders, and from now until the end of the term, is our strategic plan that our CAO referred to earlier. Only 3 months ago, we approved the updated strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, it covers all of the policy areas and program areas and projects that not only this council, input of this council, the former mayor, our staff, and most importantly, a lot of members of our public, because we had a full public consultation process for that strategic plan. So from my perspective, I think, all right, we have a mandate that was supported by the public. And we know, from my perspective, I get really excited about some of the things that we've said are really important to us from now until the end of the term, that were supported by our former mayor and was supported by this entire council. You know, one would be, again, our continuing effort to try and find ways to build alternative housing in our community. So from my perspective, I look at this and say, I know that we have someone around this table that's capable, if not more than, you know, as I said, we have a few people that I think would be more than capable, who would fulfill the mandate that has been given to us until the end of the term. So we're lucky that way. That if we go by election, we actually delay what we have before us with this strategic plan and in our mandate letters. I think it's an excellent course from now until the end of term. And personally, I think there's every reason why we should be supporting moving on that rather than delaying it. So we have a by-election, we have a new mayor in place, we find out if that new mayor continues to support what we've already got before us, and by that time, our term is not that long. So from my perspective, I think that we have the support of a great deal of our public in the current approach that we're following around this table. So for all of those reasons, I just want to get on with implementing what's before us. And in that way, I think that the best way from my perspective is going with option A, and then that's appointing a member from within our current council.
Anyone else? Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I happen to have a different view. I support option D. I've been consistent since the original mayor decided to make a change. I think, contrary to Councillor Alcock, I don't think that a closed group should make a decision like this, and I don't think that the time is, there's still plenty of time, and that would be kind of the main issue for me, is the time left on the clock. If we were discussing this decision with less than a year left, I'd say let the deputy mayor ride it out. But there's too much time. It's just over 3 years that will be left. You're saying in March next year, that's just a few months away. 3 years was the entire mandate 10 years ago. But I think as we consider the options, I think we must consider three pillars of our democracy, which are accountability, legitimacy, and transparency. We serve at the pleasure of our constituents. Every so often, as situations arise, the public is called upon to exercise the right in choosing who will represent them in our various tiers of government. This is accomplished through free and fair elections. Since the development of democratic societies, this process is a cornerstone of our governing bodies. In order to remain accountable to our population, we rely on them to judge our platforms, vision, and positions on issues that will guide us as we execute our duties. If we are deemed acceptable to the majority of voters, we will be placed into these positions of responsibility. Because of this process, every elected official will be mindful of their responsibility to the people who put them there. This process, of course, leads to legitimacy. If there is a vacancy and the position is filled by an appointment process, the appointed candidate will have to grapple with the reality that every decision that they make will be open to criticism because they were not chosen by the election process. Our one declared candidate even told me recently, and you did, that you would feel more legitimately if you went through a by-election process. There is no transparency in this position. We can't always choose when the necessity arises to consider when to hold an election. In our case, it was an opportunity that our current elected mayor decided he couldn't pass up. With an election comes transparency. If there is a call for applications from the public at large, including any interested current elected officials, they will be vetted by sitting council. Once this process is complete, the sitting councillors will retire behind closed doors to make their decision. I'm not even clear whether or not an elected official who applies for a position will be able to participate in this part of the process. After all, in an election, candidates are still eligible to vote, even for themselves. As some have argued, if the existing council were elected to make these type of decisions, but does this include sitting councillors? This evening, we have had some contentious issues brought before us to decide. We have done our due diligence and made some tough choices. There will be winners and losers in this process by its very nature. Therefore, I believe it is an infinitely better position to be in to have the backing of voters who have placed us in this position to make these tough decisions rather than be open to criticism for not having the elected authority to execute our responsibility and do our jobs to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I share the view of Councillor Thompson and Councillor Alcock. I believe that we have within us, I think we have very capable members that could fill this role. And much the way Councillor Withey had spoke to fulfilling the wishes of their constituents, in all of the discussions I've had, as I do with most big decisions, I reach out to my constituents, and I've spoken with quite literally probably pushing 100, I would say, on this issue. And I would say 4 out of 5 are in support of option A, to appoint within our ranks. So I'm going to represent my constituents the best way I know how to, and I'm going to vote for that option.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. Not a decision to be taken lightly, and as many of the decisions around this table are not. And much like Councillor Wiebe, I've reached out to my constituents, and the resounding answer from my constituents is they respect the decisions that I make on their behalf, and they put me in this position to make those decisions, regardless of the magnitude of the decision. Out of everyone I've talked to, 2 people suggested that we have a by-election. And I'm well over 500 people that I've discussed this with. So I'm very confident that I can continue to make the decisions on behalf of my constituents. And the resounding answer from them is for option A.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quite interesting hearing everybody discuss the options ahead of us, and I have to admit, I've been riding the fence on this one. I think we have some really good candidates at this table who could actually fulfill the role and have been fulfilling the role for the last little bit. But in saying that, there may be other people in the general public who may want to come and fill the role. So with taking the people out of the picture and just looking at what it is, and as Councillor Withey said, 3 years left to go, I have to admit I'm leaning a little bit towards option D for a by-election, and we'll see what plays out.
Councillor Schumacher.
So, yeah, I've had a number approach me as well, and the majority are saying appointment. Does that necessarily mean appointment or option A, or does it option C as an appointment to a call out? And I do get the idea that there is, you know, as Councillor Withey said, if we're going that route and people have to step out, necessarily that decision is still made by less majority at the table. But as Councillor Thompson has indicated, there are a number of decisions that have been made as a 3-2 vote as well. My question with option D as a by-election, we're talking one position. So as Councillor Thompson has pointed out, there may be succession positions after. I don't, again, being the newbie here, what the process is if sitting members go with by-election and they put their name forward. Could we have a by-election for all positions that would be deemed vacant at that time and just do one free-for-all, shall we say, and see how that rolls out as far as a by-election go, or do we have to do it each position by each position?
Madam Clerk, could you address that question?
Each position by each position.
So,
You can't do a,
so we can't do a,
no.
and anybody who's
No.
indicated they put their name forward the same as we would in 2022, and the chips fall where they may, so to speak.
To declare the seat vacant.
Then you have to go through the same process for each
Yeah.
vacant seat. Okay.
Will Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Withey.
Thank you once again, Madam Deputy Mayor. A couple of things, I guess. In terms of the numbers, like everyone's been approached by different people, and I would say the percentage that I'm hearing from the people that I talk to is probably, I think Councillor Weed said 8 out of 10, but I'm thinking in my case it's probably more like 9 out of 10 that want us to appoint, okay? Councillor Withey makes good points with regards to the legitimacy, the accountability, the transparency, but none of those 3 aspects are missing in option A. We're still being accountable, we're still being legitimate, and we're definitely being transparent. And we have Kojiko watching us, plus we're streaming all over the world right now, plus this incredibly huge crowd here tonight. So I think we are definitely transparent with all of those areas. So I'm sticking with option A for sure, because I don't think we're missing out on any of those 3 pillars that make up, I guess, what would constitute an election. So, thanks.
Councillor Withey, you are next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I appreciate that people have talked to people. I too have talked to people. I'm aware of 2 unscientific polls that have taken place, both favored by-election. This one is 75% for by-election with 92 respondents. The other one was over 50% for by-election. So I'll just throw that out there. The majority of the people I've spoken to personally want their voices heard. I think that the comment that we make decisions all the time is that's a different thing than what we're talking about here. The decision that we make here affects all other decisions in their legitimacy. And I don't know how 6 or 7 or however many people behind closed doors is transparent. That doesn't, I don't.
Madam Clerk, could you clarify the behind closed doors part of this? This decision is not made behind closed doors.
No, the vote is in open.
But is there a discussion that's,
Our council vacancy policy does not talk about going into closed session. It's silent on that. If council chose to go into closed session to discuss the candidates, that's their call, but the vote isn't open.
well, that would be my concern, I guess, because I'm sure if there's a couple of people or a few people at this table, it would be quite a public discussion to have. Anyway, I'm still for option D. I'm not changing my vote.
Councillor Alcott?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I just on that point, maybe through you to Tanya, isn't it council's choice if we were to go appointment from within, that then the process is to ask those members from within who are interested to submit their names, and then that's all public. Don't they actually present to council to say, this is why I'd like to be, or whatever, or am I misunderstanding? That's the way I understood it, which is very public.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So what would happen is if you chose A, the members who are interested would submit their interest to me in writing, and then we would have it at a council meeting. In this case, if it was A, it would be on December 17th. What would happen is we would go through you would be able to speak, members would be able to ask questions. You would be, it's up to you whether you want to go into closed to deliberate, but then you would come out into open and you'd be voting. You'd be voting in open, it's public.
Councillor Harmer?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a couple questions. I don't know if I should be placing this out here. I'm just curious, do we have more than the said two people who want to run for mayor? Is one question. And if we were to go into closed to discuss something, are those putting their names forward to go into closed for the discussion? Or is that not allowed? Like, it's just interesting now where you can vote for yourself or vote against yourself, so.
So the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act exempts this from anybody having to declare. So if Sally, who's a member of council, wants to put their name forward, they can vote for themselves. They do not have to declare conflict. Same as if Sally went to the regular election voting booth, they put their own ballot in the box, same. It's the same thing.
Councillor Withey?
I think it's a little different because of the discussion component of it. It's not just putting a name in a box. So I would suggest that, in general regular elections, you might be able to speak to a candidate on your doorstep or go to an open debate in the theater, but to almost cross-examine in a closed group of people is I think, bizarre in the least, and problematic at the most. Just I can't wrap my head around that one.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to make a comment on the polls. I did receive that same one today from a constituent, the 75%. And quite honestly, I don't know how to say this nicely, but to do a proper poll, they're very, very scientific. They're scientifically designed and scientifically presented and worded and everything else. They are scientific in nature, and I think when they come from what might be conceived or perceived as a special interest group, then they really, really do lack credibility. So I'm trying to be nice about this, but the poll situation really, really should not even be a consideration in this. I I have my pole on the street, and I think as we talked about, when I'm in the grocery store or walking down the street and this has been a major issue of discussion by, I think, for all of us, I think, over the last, since Scott went to Ottawa type of thing. So we're hearing from a lot of people on this, and I'm hearing, as I said, 8 to 9 out of 10 people, they want us to appoint.
Councillor Weeb's next.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I wanted to ask the two members on council who are in favor of a by-election, given this is a one member, one vote, would they be in favor of subsequent by-elections for any vacant seats that then remain on council?
I feel like we're straying a little from the conversation, but if you want to put the question out there, I'll allow it. Councillor Withey?
I'd like to first comment on Councillor Thompson's poll comment. The 75-25 was done by a media outlet with no leaning, and I mean, you just contradicted your own point by saying you've talked to people. So, what question did you pose to them when you asked them their opinion? I mean, that's an illegitimate poll as well. We can all talk to people and maybe bring up this exorbitant cost, or maybe talk about the time, or maybe slant whatever way. So you can't just summarily dismiss what you don't like and only take what you like. I take what councillors have said at face value. I've had different experiences personally. This particular poll, the 75-25, was by a member of the media. The question was there on the page. It was pretty simple. Do you support a by-election or an appointment? And those were the results. And, 92 of our citizens responded. As to the follow-up question, I think that that would be subject to further debate at the time. I believe that the head of council is a different position than the rest of sitting council. I think, as in Councillor Fitzgerald's original situation, I think that was an appropriate process for that position. The head of council is the CEO of the corporation, and that has a lot more responsibility than the rest of us. So that is why it's important, for legitimacy and transparency and accountability. It's a completely different ballgame.
Councillor Armour, did you want to answer the
Well,
question?
I think Councillor Withey said it fine. As I said before, I've sort of been riding this rail, and it's too bad that I think we missed the boat. Maybe when the elections were taking place for the MP, that maybe we should have had some town hall meetings and had some information from the public then. Unfortunately, we're presented with this today or tonight to make a decision, and I think doing the by-election for this position is one way, but doing an appointment for the other position, I'd be fine with. So.
Councillor
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Terziano. I don't want to get into the poll debate, but one of the things that, like everybody else, as I said, I've talked to a lot of people, and there have been some lively discussions. But one of the nuances that often are part of that discussion, I think it's different when you say to someone, "Do you support a by-election, or do you support an appointment?" And a lot of people, I'm not saying all, but a number of people are not aware of that third option, which is our option of appointing from within. And I think that, as I said, I don't think all councils would necessarily have the same opportunity that we do, where we actually have, I think, a number of representatives that have expressed an interest and also would be, I believe, a very good mayor. And so I don't think it's as black and white as do you support a by-election or an appointment. Because I'll go back to my discussions, when people I've talked to are sort of on that fence, and they say, well, there's part of me fundamentally, it's a by-election. Be damned with the money sort of thing, and I certainly get it. And then when we have that discussion about that third option, it changes it. Because it's right, I hadn't realized that you could do that, as opposed to the way I would see it when you appoint, going out to the public for a position like the mayor, you're starting from scratch. And after, as I said, a number of discussions, people have said to me they like that option for all of the reasons that I've talked about, because we have a mandate and we have a lot of issues that we want to address. And do we wait another, and you said, I know, Councillor Withey, that it's only a few months away. It is probably the end of March, beginning of April. And that pushes us closer to 2.5 years, not 3 years, right? And I know it's important, though, because people keep saying, you still have 3 years left. No, we don't if we go by election. So I think that's an important nuance that I just wanted to clarify.
Okay. Sure, you can take one more.
I just want to sum up with something. As everybody's pointed out, this has been quite an active conversation in the community. But there was somebody, and I don't know where, what site or whatever, there was somebody wrote something on Facebook, and I'll remove the name to protect the innocent, because you could insert anybody's name in there. But this is basically what it said. I have never heard blank speak, have no idea what their position is on any issue, and quite frankly, have no idea how effectively they would run this town. I'm all for a by-election, and if blank wants to run and run against other people, I would love to hear where they stand and see if they would get elected. So that, to me, says it all in a nutshell. We're all sitting here, and we all know everybody, and we all think who's capable and who may not be capable for whatever reason. But the public, this is how we're governed. This is the process that we go through. And as I said earlier, we can't always pick the timing of this process. Things could happen. There's been other situations where people have passed away in office and things like that. So with this much time left on the clock, and Councillor Alcock and I can debate how much actual time it is and what it actually means, I am still favoring option D. And as we come to a close in this, I would request for a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of final comments with regards to that. And first of all, in response to my particular polling, I did not go out and solicit opinions. I've been approached by people who expressed their opinions to me. I would make the point that even though we are now just a little over a year into our mandate, in the province of Ontario, there have now been 15 of these such vacancies. In every situation, they've been filled by appointment. Not by election, but by appointment. And they were not small municipalities by any stretch of the imagination. Some of them were municipalities much larger than ours. So for what that's worth, I don't think it's necessary for us to set a new standard with regards to how we go about this process. But if 15 other municipalities in the province do it this way, I think maybe there's some legitimacy in that as well. So, and yes, I'm all for a recorded vote on this.
Councillor Schumacher.
Just one last, and with Councillor Thompson, I mean, we have our own precedent set here where we've appointed a mayor in the past. We're going back to 1970, but it has been done here in the town of Huntsville. And I think, was that back then, there was a 2-year term, so we're looking at halfway through, sort of similar to the timing debate. My question, if we go to by-election and a new mayor is elected, possibly not even sitting members that are putting their names forward. Does that change the whole makeup of what has been put forward? New chairs of committees, new appointments to how we completely run what's happened? Is that, yeah, that would be their decision. Okay.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion to put an option into the resolution? We can read it and vote on it. Councillor Thompson.
I'll move option A.
Okay, so I'll just read the resolution one more time so there's no confusion. It's moved by Councillor Wiebe, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Be it resolved that council, in accordance with subsection 263(1) of the Municipal Act, hereby fills a vacancy for the office of mayor by option A. Option A being appointment, a current member of council, directing the municipal clerk to solicit notice in writing from members of council to fill the vacancy, and that the names be considered at a council meeting to be held on December 17th, 2019. And as a recorded vote was requested, the clerk will do that.
Councillor Wiebe.
Yes.
Councillor Alcock.
Yes.
Councillor Armour. No. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yes.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Withy.
No.
Deputy Mayor Terziano.
Yes.
The ayes have it 6-2.
Okay, that is carried. Bylaws. Okay. Bylaws. Okay, we're going to bylaws. Moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that bylaw numbers 2019-120, 121, 124, 125, and 126 be reported and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 25th day of November 2019. Bylaw 2019-120, appointing a committee of adjustment. 2019-121, repeal and replace building services agreement. Bylaw 2013-16. Bylaw 2019-124, acquisition of 12 Yonge Street North. 2019-125, Edmonds, 268 West Brown Road rezoning. 2019-126, Liatis Marvoldis, 35 West Street North rezoning. And Councillor Withy has declared a conflict of interest.
For two of those.
Questions? All in favor? It's carried. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Armour. Be it resolved that council approve the donation of an engineer for a day pass to the Rotary Club of Huntsville for their annual Christmas auction in the amount of $250. And further, that the funds be offset equally between the discretionary funds of Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Wiebe. Questions? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, and we have council correspondence in your packages, and we have district updates. Who wants to go first with the district updates? Nobody? Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. Our last meeting at Public Works was a joint meeting, or at least the beginning of it was a joint meeting with Corporate Services and Public Works. And I think I'll let the Deputy Mayor speak about the first part of that because it had to do with the finances. And I think all that came up pretty well. In the latter part of the meeting, or the sole meeting of Public Works, the one discussion that came up had to do with the increase in garbage collection and recycling and so on and so forth. There's going to be a major increase in the cost of that. And our Commissioner Stevens, put forward a plan to ameliorate to some degree the increase in the costs, and it meant cutting back on a lot of service and so on and so forth. And committee, almost without exception, well, I think without exception, was against any cutbacks because they all had to do with environmental issues. And the actual cost per, and we base everything nowadays on a $300,000 assessment, as you know. And the actual cost per $300,000 assessment was really not significant. And as a result of that, anyway, I think we took a new pickup truck out of the discussion for the Rosewarne landfill site in Bracebridge. Other than that, everything else was just kept in there because we said this is too important. In some cases, you make forward progress. You make progress in some areas when it comes to environmental issues, and you just don't want to go backwards. And so we were loath to do that. So that was probably the major part of the discussion. Usual things, though, as usual. We spent a lot of money, which we do at Public Works at the District of Muskoka. We can't help ourselves, right? I mean, it's just everything is so expensive on a district-wide basis. So yeah, that was basically for me. I think that part of it, when you're talking about a few dollars, sometimes takes up the vast majority of the time of a meeting type of thing, and that was the case in that meeting. So that's pretty much it, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Withey, do you have a report?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Full disclosure, I missed that meeting, but I had to have discussions, and I'm up on what's gone on there. First off, though, Commander Armour had a report at our committee for purchasing new stretchers. What do you call them? Do you want to speak to this at all? Do you want your report to read?
I'll just give a synopsis of it. We have what they call Power Pro Striker stretchers, and they have a lifespan of 7 years. We've pushed them now to 10 years, so it's now time for replacement. So I just submitted a report to Health Services for a capital spend of about $250,000, which was approved.
Which was a good thing, I believe. Further on the discussion, and this kind of links into the very first presentation we had this evening when we talk about healthcare dollars, they talked about Fairburn. Many may know, have been involved in Fairburn redevelopment for years. There is a little bit of confusion around the table now as to who is going to administer Fairburn moving forward into the redevelopment stage. The government has proposed or has released a whole bunch of new licenses for beds, which means funding for beds. Fairburn, when they weren't issuing new licenses, was approved for 96 beds, up from 76, and has since upped that request to 160 beds. You may recall back then that $10.5 million was pledged from the district towards the Fairburn redevelopment project. With this potential increase in beds, there'll be an increase in cost. So again, there'll be somebody else knocking at the door for money that we will or will not decide to fund. The estimation for a 160-bed home would be in the area of around $60 million capital costs. We were looking at 96 beds to be somewhere in the range of 30 to 35. That's with the donated land that we have. To further complicate the matter, the district went out when it was announced in April and submitted another application for 160 new beds for somewhere in South Muskoka, location to be determined. which is serving to complicate things a bit because the ministry is kind of saying, well, we got two things going on here. So that's getting sorted out, as well as the governance piece. There are some people that think the district should take it over, and just because we're already administering the Pines, there are others that are passionate about the fact that Fairburn is the only non-for-profit home in the area, and it should remain so. So that debate continues, waiting as well on the ministry as far as where the beds are going. There is a timeline where they want to get these licenses out, and I'm sure, like others, they will be knocking on the district's door again for some help in that regard, if not taking the whole thing over. So that's my report. Thank you.
Councillor Alcock.
That was interesting. Was? Mine will be brief. We had a public meeting for a vacant land condominium file in the town of Huntsville with regard to a proposed industrial consent to sever for an industrial site right on the main street, very near the Cloverleaf onto Highway 11. So that was just a public meeting for information, so no decisions around that. We did approve and recommend to District Council our revised Housing for Everyone, the District Municipality of Muskoka's Housing and Homelessness Plan, which we're required to update every 5 years. And I have to say it was a great report. And what was kind of exciting, they had taken some of the recommendations that seemed to be coming out of the Housing Task Force and included them in the updated 10-year plan, and that if council should pass it, it will be submitted to the province, which requires housing service providers to prepare a plan of this nature. We also approved updating our implementation of the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, which allows the district to spend dollars for people who want to make changes to their houses, to create more housing and to upgrade it for a number of reasons. So we've made that program more flexible and to allow our staff to actually be more faster in providing a response to applicants so that they don't have to go through the entire process. So I think that's a really good change, and hopefully that will be approved at district. We had a couple of financial updates and a verbal update on the progress of the Macaulay Treehouse expansion, which started about a month ago. That's it.
Okay. And as Councillor Thompson alluded to, Engineering, Public Works and Finance had a joint meeting, and the purpose of that meeting was to pass the rate-supported budget at district, which covers water and sewer and solid waste, and the staff was working towards to come in at under 2.5% in water and sewer, and they actually came in at 0.9% for the water and sewer. However, solid waste came in slightly higher than the number they were working towards at almost 7%. And other than that, the regular council meeting, of course, the big agenda item was the development charges down there. Discussion much like we had here today, only they settled on a 50% reduction in residential and freezing of the commercial rates. And that was the highlights, I guess, of the meeting, unless you wanted to watch the OPP instruct us on how easy it's going to be caught drinking and driving or doing drugs and driving. and they noted that they are out there for the Christmas season, so beware. And on that note, speaking of the Christmas season, the Santa Claus Parade is Friday night, and we have been invited to walk in the parade again, so anybody who is so inclined, we will meet at 7 Main at about 6:45, and then I guess we'll just waltz in there ahead of a float and walk out to the mall. And the parade route has not been altered this year due to construction, so starting up at Lorne, going all the way to the mall. Okay, I think it may be bumpy. Yeah. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. Be it resolved that confirmation bylaw 2019-129 be received, numbered, and read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed this 25th day of November 2019. All in favor? That's carried. And I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withey and seconded by Councillor Weed. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 9:14 p.m. All in favor? Thanks, everyone.